Marcus had $20 left and a dying daughter when he heard the scream. He could walk away like everyone else, keep his last money for medicine, or he could help the terrified woman being dragged into a black car. The gunshot that followed changed everything forever. Before watching full story, comment below from where you watching. Also like and subscribe for more stories. The rain hammered against the broken window of Marcus's small apartment like angry fists. He sat at his kitchen table, staring at the stack of unpaid bills that seemed to grow taller each day. His daughter Emma, only 8 years old, slept peacefully in the next room, unaware of their desperate situation. Marcus rubbed his tired eyes. 3 months ago, he had been fired from his construction job after refusing to cut corners on a building project. The supervisor wanted him to use cheaper materials that weren't safe. Marcus couldn't do it. He wouldn't risk people's lives for money. But now, with no income and their savings gone, he wondered if his conscience had cost them everything. The apartment was cold. The heating had been shut off 2 weeks ago. Marcus pulled his old jacket tighter around his shoulders and looked at the last $20 in his wallet. It had to last until he found work, but no one was hiring. Every door he knocked on was slammed in his face. Emma stirred in her sleep, coughing softly. She had been sick for days, but Marcus couldn't afford to take her to a doctor. The guilt ate at him like poison. His little girl deserved so much better than this life of struggle and fear. A loud crash from the street made Marcus jump. He looked out the window and saw expensive cars speeding through the rain. Rich people in their warm, dry vehicles, probably heading to their big houses where the heat worked and the refrigerator was full. Marcus clenched his fists. The world was unfair. Good people suffered while the wealthy lived in comfort. He had worked hard his whole life, been honest and kind, and what did it get him? A sick daughter and an empty bank account. But Marcus didn't know that tomorrow would change everything. Tomorrow, his sacrifice would touch the heart of someone who could change his life forever. The next morning brought no relief. Emma's fever had gotten worse during the night. She lay pale and weak in her small bed, her breathing shallow. Marcus knelt beside her, his heart breaking as he felt her burning forehead. "Daddy," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I don't feel good." "I know, sweetheart," Marcus said, fighting back tears. "Daddy's going to make you better. I promise, but how?" He had no money for medicine, no way to pay for a hospital visit. He felt like the worst father in the world. His own daughter was suffering and he was powerless to help her. Marcus made a desperate decision. He would sell his wedding ring, the last thing he had left from his late wife, Sarah. She had died in a car accident 2 years ago, leaving Marcus to raise Emma alone. The ring was his most precious possession, a symbol of the only true love he had ever known. But Emma's life was more important than memories. He walked through the cold streets to the pawn shop, his heart heavy with each step. The rain had stopped, but the sky remained gray and threatening. The city felt hostile, like it was pushing him toward some terrible fate. At the pawn shop, Marcus placed the gold ring on the counter. The shopkeeper barely looked at it. $50, the man said coldly. "But it's real gold," Marcus protested. "It's worth much more than that," the shopkeeper shrugged. "50, take it or leave it." Marcus closed his eyes. $50 wouldn't be enough for the medicine Emma needed. He was about to agree when he heard shouting from outside. "Help! Someone help me!" a woman's voice cried. Marcus looked through the shop window and saw something that made his blood run cold. A beautiful young woman in an elegant dress was being dragged toward a black car by 2 large men. She was fighting desperately, but she was no match for their strength. Other people on the street turned away, pretending not to see. Nobody wanted to get involved. It was easier to look the other way, but Marcus couldn't ignore someone in trouble. It went against everything he believed in. Even in his darkest hour, he couldn't abandon his principles. He grabbed his ring back from the counter and ran outside. "Let her go," Marcus shouted, running toward the struggling group. The 2 men looked up in surprise. One of them was tall and muscular with cold, dead eyes. The other was shorter but built like a tank. They both wore expensive suits that couldn't hide the violence in their faces. "Walk away, old man," the tall one growled. "This doesn't concern you." The woman looked at Marcus with desperate, pleading eyes. She was young, maybe 25, with long dark hair and a face that spoke of both beauty and intelligence. Her expensive dress was torn and there was fear in her voice. "Please," she begged, "don't let them take me. My fiancé, he's going to hurt me." Marcus felt his anger rise. He thought of Emma lying sick at home. He thought of Sarah, who had always stood up for what was right. He thought of all the times he had been pushed down by the world, told to stay quiet and accept injustice. Not today. I said let her go, Marcus repeated, stepping closer. The short man laughed. You want to be a hero? Fine, we'll make you a dead hero. He pulled out a gun, pointing it directly at Marcus's chest. The woman screamed. People on the street scattered, running for cover. Marcus should have been terrified. He should have run like everyone else. But all he could think about was Emma, and how he wanted to be the kind of father she could be proud of. The kind of man who stood up to bullies no matter the cost. You don't scare me, Marcus said quietly. I've got nothing left to lose. That wasn't entirely true. He had Emma. But he also knew that if he walked away now, he would never be able to look at himself in the mirror again. Some things were more important than safety. The gunman's finger tightened on the trigger. Marcus could see it happening in slow motion. He could run, or he could do what was right. He chose right. Marcus lunged forward, trying to knock the gun away. The weapon went off with a deafening bang. Pain exploded through Marcus's shoulder as the bullet tore through him, but he kept fighting. With his good arm, he punched the gunman hard in the face, sending him stumbling backward. The tall man tried to grab the woman again, but she broke free and ran toward Marcus. Come on, she shouted. We have to go. Blood was pouring from Marcus's wound, but he forced himself to move. The two attackers were recovering, and more men were emerging from the black car. Together, Marcus and the woman ran down the street, leaving a trail of blood behind them. They didn't stop running until they reached a small cafe several blocks away. Marcus collapsed into a chair, his face white with pain and blood loss. The woman immediately tore strips from her expensive dress to make bandages for his wound. You're hurt because of me, she said, her hands shaking as she tried to stop the bleeding. I'm so sorry. It's okay, Marcus gasped. Are you safe? That's what matters. The woman looked at him with wonder as if she couldn't believe what she was hearing. You don't even know who I am. Why did you risk your life for a stranger? Marcus managed a weak smile. Because it was the right thing to do. The woman finished bandaging his shoulder and sat back. For the first time, Marcus really looked at her. She was beautiful, but there was something more, an intelligence and strength that shone through her fear. My name is Isabella, she said softly. Isabella Victoria Rosewood. Marcus's eyes widened. Even he knew that name. The Rosewood family was one of the wealthiest and most powerful families in the country. Isabella's father owned banks, hotels, and half the businesses in the city. You're, Marcus started. A princess, Isabella said bitterly. That's what they call me in the newspapers. Princess Isabella, living her fairy tale life. But fairy tales aren't real, are they? She looked out the cafe window, her eyes distant and sad. Those men work for my fiancé, Victor Blackstone. He's not a good man. My father arranged our engagement to merge our family businesses. I tried to tell him that Victor is cruel, that he hurts me, but my father won't listen. Money is more important to him than my happiness. Marcus felt a surge of anger. No parent should force their child into that situation. I was trying to run away today, Isabella continued. I had a bag packed, money saved. I was going to disappear, start a new life somewhere Victor couldn't find me. But his men caught me just a few blocks from my house. She turned back to Marcus, tears in her eyes. You saved my life today. You took a bullet for someone you'd never met. I don't understand why. Marcus thought of Emma waiting for him at home. He thought of all the times he had felt helpless, unable to protect the people he loved. Because everyone deserves to be free, he said simply. Everyone deserves to choose their own path in life. The next morning, Marcus woke up in a hospital bed. The pain in his shoulder was manageable now thanks to proper medical care. But his first thought wasn't about himself. It was about Emma. He tried to sit up, panic filling his chest. My daughter, he said aloud. I have to get to my daughter. She's fine, a gentle voice said from beside his bed. Marcus turned to see Isabella sitting in a chair next to him. She looked different than she had the day before, more confident, more determined. Her expensive clothes had been replaced by simple jeans and a sweater, but she seemed more real this way. I went to your apartment last night, Isabella explained. I found Emma with a high fever. I took her to the children's hospital and made sure she got the best care possible. She's sleeping now, but the doctors say she'll make a full recovery. Marcus felt tears streaming down his face. You? You saved her. You saved me first, Isabella replied. It was the least I could do. A doctor entered the room smiling warmly. Mr. Chen, you're very lucky. The bullet missed all the vital organs. You'll need some physical therapy, but you should recover completely. After the doctor left, Isabella moved her chair closer to Marcus's bed. I've been thinking all night about what you did for me, she said. You risked everything for a stranger. You have a daughter who needs you, but you still chose to help someone in trouble. That kind of courage, that kind of goodness, it's rare in this world. Marcus shook his head. I'm not special. I just did what anyone should do. But most people don't, Isabella said firmly. Most people walk away. Most people choose safety over what's right. You didn't. You showed me that there are still good people in this world. She reached into her purse and pulled out a business card. I want to offer you a job, she said. My family's company needs someone with integrity to oversee our construction projects. Someone who won't cut corners or compromise on safety. The salary would be enough for you to give Emma everything she needs. Good schools, healthcare, a safe home. Marcus stared at the card, hardly believing what he was hearing. But there's more, Isabella continued. I'm not running away anymore. Yesterday you showed me what real courage looks like. I'm going to stand up to my father and Victor. I'm going to fight for my freedom just like you fought for mine. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Marcus's new job allowed him to move Emma into a beautiful apartment in a safe neighborhood. For the first time in months, he could sleep without worrying about paying rent or buying food. Emma recovered completely from her illness. Marcus watched her play in their new living room, her laughter filling the space with joy. She had asked about the bandage on his shoulder, and he had told her a simple truth, that sometimes grown-ups get hurt trying to help other people. Like a superhero? Emma had asked, her eyes wide with admiration. Something like that, Marcus had replied, smiling. But while Marcus's life was improving, Isabella was fighting the battle of her life. She had confronted her father about Victor, showing him evidence of her fiancé's cruelty and his connections to dangerous people. At first her father had refused to listen, but Isabella was no longer the frightened girl who had once accepted his decisions without question. She hired lawyers and private investigators. She gathered proof of Victor's illegal activities and his violent nature, and slowly, painfully, she began to build a case that even her father couldn't ignore. Victor didn't give up easily. He tried to intimidate Isabella, sending his men to follow her and making threats against anyone who helped her. But Isabella had learned something from Marcus, that standing up to bullies was the only way to stop them. One evening, Isabella came to visit Marcus and Emma in their new home. Emma had taken to calling her Princess Bella, and Isabella seemed to love the nickname. She would spend hours playing games with the little girl, reading her stories, and listening to her chatter about school and friends. You're good with her, Marcus observed as they watched Emma color pictures at the kitchen table. She reminds me of myself at that age, Isabella said softly, full of dreams and hope. I want to make sure she never loses that the way I almost did. Marcus looked at Isabella carefully. Over the past weeks, he had seen her transform from a frightened victim into a strong, confident woman. But more than that, he had come to admire her intelligence, her compassion, and her determination to fight for what was right. How are things going with your father? He asked. Isabella sighed. He's starting to see the truth about Victor. The evidence is too strong to ignore. But ending the engagement isn't just about calling off a wedding. It's about business contracts, family alliances, millions of dollars in deals. Money, Marcus said bitterly. It always comes back to money. Not always, Isabella said, looking at him meaningfully. Some things are worth more than money. You taught me that. The showdown came on a cold Thursday evening. Victor had demanded a meeting with Isabella, threatening to hurt Marcus and Emma if she didn't agree. Isabella knew it was a trap, but she also knew that running would only make things worse. She arranged to meet Victor at an upscale restaurant downtown, but she didn't come alone. Marcus insisted on being there despite Isabella's protests that it was too dangerous. You risked your life for me once, she argued. I won't let you do it again. This isn't just about you anymore, Marcus replied. Victor threatened Emma. That makes it personal. They arrived at the restaurant to find Victor waiting with 2 bodyguards. Not the same men from the street, but equally dangerous looking. Victor was a tall, handsome man in his 30s with cold blue eyes and a smile that never reached them. "Isabella, my dear," he said smoothly as they sat down. "I see you brought your pet construction worker with you." "His name is Marcus," Isabella said coldly. "And he's worth 10 of you." Victor's smile faltered for just a moment. How touching. "But this little game has gone on long enough. You will marry me as planned, or your friend here will have an unfortunate accident, along with his daughter." Marcus leaned forward, his voice quiet but dangerous. "If you touch Emma, I'll kill you myself." Victor laughed. Brave words from a man who works with his hands for a living. "Do you have any idea who you're threatening?" "I know exactly who you are," Marcus replied. "You're a bully who hurts people weaker than himself. You're a coward who uses money and violence to get what you want. And you're the kind of man who makes the world a darker place just by being in it." The restaurant had grown quiet around them. Other diners were starting to notice the tension at their table. "I've had enough of this," Victor snarled. He gestured to his bodyguards. "Teach them both a lesson." But as the men started to move, something unexpected happened. Police officers appeared from all corners of the restaurant, their guns drawn. "Victor Blackstone," one of them announced loudly, "you're under arrest for conspiracy, extortion, and attempted murder." Victor's face went white. "This is impossible. You can't prove anything." Isabella stood up, pulling a small recording device from her purse. "Actually, we can. You just confessed to threatening Marcus and Emma in front of all these witnesses, and this device recorded everything." As the police led Victor away in handcuffs, Isabella turned to Marcus with tears in her eyes. "It's over," she whispered. "He can't hurt anyone anymore." Marcus pulled her into a gentle hug, careful of his still healing shoulder. "You did it. You stood up to him." "We did it," Isabella corrected. "I couldn't have been brave without your example." 6 months later, Marcus stood in the backyard of his new house, watching Emma play on the swing set he had built for her. The house was modest but comfortable, with a garden where Emma could play safely, and a workshop where Marcus could pursue his love of woodworking. Isabella had used her influence to ensure that Victor was prosecuted to the full extent of the law. He was now serving a 10-year prison sentence for his crimes. Her father, shocked by the evidence of his future son-in-law's true nature, had publicly apologized to Isabella and promised to never again try to control her personal life. The construction company that Marcus now managed was thriving. He had implemented new safety standards and quality controls that had quickly earned them a reputation as the most reliable builders in the city. More importantly, Marcus felt proud of the work he was doing, creating safe, beautiful buildings where families could live and work without fear. Isabella had started a foundation to help women escape abusive relationships. She used her wealth and connections to provide safe houses, legal aid, and job training for women who needed to start their lives over. It gave her a sense of purpose she had never felt before. "Daddy, look how high I can swing," Emma called out from the backyard. Marcus smiled and waved at his daughter. She was healthy, happy, and full of the confidence that came from knowing she was loved and protected. That was all he had ever wanted for her. "She's beautiful," Isabella said, appearing beside him with 2 cups of coffee. "She's everything to me," Marcus replied, accepting the warm cup gratefully. They stood in comfortable silence for a while, watching Emma play. Over the past months, Isabella had become a regular visitor to their home. She and Emma had formed a special bond, and Marcus found himself looking forward to her visits more and more. "Marcus," Isabella said suddenly, her voice nervous, "there's something I need to tell you." Marcus turned to look at her, concerned by her tone. "What is it?" Isabella took a deep breath. "That day when you saved me, when you took a bullet for a stranger. You changed my life. But it wasn't just because you rescued me from Victor. It was because you showed me what real goodness looks like, what real courage looks like." She set down her coffee cup and turned to face him fully. "I've been in love with you for months," she admitted. "I know we come from different worlds. I know I'm wealthy and you're, well, not, but none of that matters to me. What matters is that you're kind and brave and honest. You're the kind of man I want to spend my life with, the kind of man I want Emma to look up to as she grows up." Marcus felt his heart racing. He had felt something growing between them too, but he had never dared to hope that someone like Isabella could love someone like him. "Isabella," he said softly, "I love you too. I have for a long time. But are you sure about this? Really sure?" Once the excitement of everything that's happened dies down, You might realize that we're just too different." Isabella smiled, reaching out to take his hand. "The only difference between us that matters is that you're a hero, and I'm still learning how to be brave. But I think with you and Emma, I might just figure it out." 1 year after the day Marcus took a bullet for a stranger, he found himself standing in the same spot where it had all begun. But everything was different now. Emma, now 9 years old, was healthy and thriving in her new school. She had friends, hobbies, and dreams for the future. Most importantly, she had Isabella in her life, not as a replacement for her mother, but as someone who loved her unconditionally and showed her that families could be built on love rather than just blood. Marcus's construction company had been featured in several magazines for its innovative safety practices and community involvement. He had hired dozens of workers, many of them single parents or people down on their luck who just needed someone to give them a chance. Isabella's foundation had helped hundreds of women escape dangerous situations and build new lives. She had testified before Congress about domestic violence and had become a powerful advocate for the voiceless. But more than her public work, she had found personal happiness in her new family. They had married in a simple ceremony in the garden behind their house, with Emma as the flower girl and Isabella's father, who had become a surprisingly loving grandfather, walking Isabella down the aisle. It wasn't the grand society wedding that Isabella had once been expected to have, but it was perfect because it was real. "Daddy," Emma said, tugging on Marcus's sleeve as they walked through the city streets. "Tell me again about the day you met Bella." Marcus smiled and looked at his wife, who was holding Emma's other hand. Isabella squeezed his fingers and nodded encouragingly. "Well," Marcus began, "it was raining, and I was having the worst day of my life. I thought everything was hopeless. But then I heard someone calling for help and I remembered something important." "What?" Emma asked, even though she had heard this story dozens of times. "I remembered that even when everything seems dark, we still have a choice. We can choose to help others even when we're hurting ourselves. We can choose to be brave even when we're scared. And sometimes when we make the right choice, amazing things happen." Emma nodded solemnly. "And you chose to help Bella even though you got hurt." "That's right," Marcus said. "And it was the best choice I ever made because it brought us all together." Isabella stopped walking and knelt down to Emma's level. "Your daddy is a hero, Emma, not because he's strong or fearless, but because he does the right thing even when it's hard." "That's what real heroes do?" Emma beamed with pride. "When I grow up, I want to be a hero too." "You already are," Isabella said softly. "Every time you're kind to someone, every time you stand up for what's right, you're being a hero." As they continued walking, Marcus reflected on how much their lives had changed. The bullet scar on his shoulder had faded, but the lessons from that day remained clear. Good people existed in the world, and sometimes they were rewarded for their goodness. Love was real, justice was possible, and families could be built on the foundation of courage and compassion. 5 years later, Marcus stood in front of the Chen Rosewood Community Center, a beautiful building that he had designed and built with his own hands. The center provided job training, childcare, and support services for families in need. It was funded by Isabella's foundation and staffed by volunteers from throughout the community. Emma, now 14, was helping to teach younger children how to read in one of the center's classrooms. She had grown into a confident, compassionate young woman who shared her father's sense of justice and Isabella's determination to make the world better. "Are you ready for this?" Isabella asked, adjusting Marcus's tie as they prepared for the center's grand opening ceremony. "As ready as I'll ever be," Marcus replied. He still felt uncomfortable with public speaking, but he had learned that sometimes sharing your story could inspire others to find their own courage. The crowd gathered in front of the center was larger than Marcus had expected. There were families from the neighborhood, city officials, reporters, and business leaders. But the people who mattered most to Marcus were right there beside him, his daughter and his wife, the two women who had taught him that love was the strongest force in the world. The mayor introduced Marcus as a man who proves that heroism isn't about having superpowers or wealth, but about having the courage to do what's right, even when it costs you everything. Marcus stepped up to the podium and looked out at the crowd. For a moment he was transported back to that rainy day when he had been a desperate single father with $20 in his pocket and no hope for the future. 6 years ago, he began, his voice steady. "I was at the lowest point of my life. I had no money, no job, and a sick daughter I couldn't afford to help. I felt like the world had forgotten about people like me, people who worked hard but still couldn't get ahead." He paused, finding Isabella's eyes in the crowd. She smiled encouragingly. "But then I learned something important. The world hadn't forgotten about me. I had forgotten about the world. I had become so focused on my own problems that I had stopped seeing the problems of others. When I saw someone in trouble that day, I had a choice. I could walk away and protect myself, or I could help, even if it meant getting hurt." Marcus touched his shoulder unconsciously, remembering the pain of the bullet. "I chose to help, and that choice changed everything. Not because I was rewarded for being good, though I was blessed beyond measure, but because I remembered who I wanted to be. I remembered that we're all connected, that we all have a responsibility to take care of each other." He gestured toward the community center behind him. "This building isn't just made of bricks and mortar. It's made of hope. Hope that when people are struggling, their community will be there to help them. Hope that when children need guidance, caring adults will step up to provide it. Hope that when families are in crisis, they won't face it alone." The crowd was completely silent, hanging on every word. "Everyone here has the power to be a hero," Marcus continued. "Not by fighting villains or performing impossible feats, but by choosing kindness over indifference, courage over comfort, love over fear. The world needs heroes now more than ever, and the best part is, you don't need superpowers or special training. You just need to care about someone other than yourself." As Marcus stepped back from the podium, the crowd erupted in applause. But he barely heard it. His attention was focused on Emma, who was looking at him with such pride and love that it took his breath away. Isabella put her arm around his waist and whispered in his ear. "I'm proud of you." "I'm proud of us," Marcus replied. "All of us." 10 years later, the Chen Rosewood Community Center had become a model for similar programs across the country. Emma, now in college studying social work, spent her summers working at the center and planning to expand its programs after graduation. Marcus and Isabella had 2 more children, twins named Sarah and Michael, after Marcus's late wife and Isabella's grandfather, who had taught her the importance of using wealth responsibly. The children were growing up knowing that they were privileged, but that privilege came with responsibility. Victor Blackston had been released from prison after serving 8 years of his sentence. He had tried to restart his criminal enterprises but found that the world had moved on without him. The business empire he had once controlled had been dismantled, and his former associates wanted nothing to do with him. He eventually left the country, a broken man whose cruelty had ultimately destroyed him. Marcus still worked in construction, but now he owned one of the most successful building companies in the region. Every building he constructed was built to last, with safety and quality as the top priorities. He had never forgotten the lesson he had learned as a young man, that cutting corners might save money in the short term, but it always cost more in the long run. Isabella had written a book about her experiences, titled "The Day My Savior Took a Bullet." The book became a bestseller and inspired countless women to leave abusive relationships and countless people to stand up for those who couldn't protect themselves. But the most important legacy of that rainy day wasn't measured in buildings, constructed, books sold, or lives directly saved. It was measured in the ripple effect of one good deed. Emma grew up to run for political office, inspired by her father's example of fighting for justice even when it was difficult. Sarah became a doctor, dedicated to treating patients regardless of their ability to pay. Michael became a teacher, working in underserved communities to give children the same opportunities that Emma had received. The families helped by the community center went on to help others. The women saved by Isabella's foundation became advocates for other victims. The workers hired by Marcus's company learned not just construction skills, but the importance of integrity and craftsmanship. Each act of kindness inspired another. Each moment of courage gave someone else the strength to be brave. Each choice to help rather than turn away made the world a little bit brighter. Marcus often thought about the moment when he had grabbed his wedding ring back from the pawnshop counter and run toward the sound of someone calling for help. In that instant, he had no way of knowing that his decision would change not just his life, but the lives of countless others. That was the true power of heroism. Not that it solved every problem or fixed every injustice, but that it reminded people that goodness was possible, that courage was contagious, that love was stronger than fear. On quiet evenings, when the children were asleep and he and Isabella sat together on their porch, Marcus sometimes marveled at the journey that had brought them to this point. A single father taking a bullet for a stranger had somehow led to a love story that spanned decades. A family built on the foundation of courage and compassion, and a legacy that would outlive them all. Isabella would catch him in these moments of reflection and ask what he was thinking about. "Just remembering," Marcus would reply. "Remembering the day I learned that sometimes the worst moments of our lives are actually the doorway to the best ones." "Do you ever regret it?" Isabella would ask. "Taking that risk when you had Emma to think about?" Marcus would always shake his head. Never. Emma needed to see that her father was the kind of man who stood up for what was right. She needed to learn that lesson more than she needed safety, and besides, he would add, reaching for Isabella's hand, "Look how it turned out." The scar on Marcus's shoulder had long since faded to a thin white line, barely visible unless you knew where to look, but the mark that day had left on his soul would never fade. It had reminded him of who he was meant to be, and it had led him to a life beyond his wildest dreams. Sometimes, when Marcus told their story to new volunteers at the community center, someone would ask if he believed in fate, if he thought he had been destined to be in that place at that moment to save Isabella. Marcus would always smile and give the same answer. "I don't know about fate, but I know about choice. Every day we choose who we want to be. That day I chose to be someone my daughter could be proud of. Everything else was just a gift." The single dad who took a bullet saving a princess had become something more than a hero. He had become a reminder that ordinary people could do extraordinary things, that love could triumph over fear, and that sometimes the most important victories were won not with weapons or wealth, but with simple human decency. And in a world that often seemed dark and hopeless, that was the most powerful message of all.